afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's August the 7th, 2018. We're here at 6 p.m. at City Hall at 116 West Bridge Street, Granbury, Texas. The Granbury City Council regular meeting is now called to order. I'd like to make a note that Mayor Pro Tem Tony Mobley will not be with us tonight. I'd like to call upon Pastor Larry Dickens with the Faith Assembly of God to do the invocation for us, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas Pledge, led by Councilperson Reiner. All rise, please.
Our Heavenly Father, we are grateful, first of all, for the men and women that have chosen to give their lives in service, to serve our community in leadership. We're grateful for the work that they do and for the efforts that they put forth. Also, Father, we're grateful that you put governments in place and that you established our steps. And so it is by divine directive that we have gathered here tonight. And we thank you for the privilege of praying over this meeting. We know that your word tells us that if we ask for wisdom, you will give it to us liberally and you won't upbraid us. And so, Father, for this council and for these folks that are leading our city, we pray that your divine wisdom would be granted to them. And we give you praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And to our Texas flag.
On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. At this time of the council meeting, we normally have a citizens participation where citizens sign up to speak. We have nobody speaking or has signed up to speak tonight, so we'll move on down to the consent agenda. Our consent agenda for tonight is number one being to consider approving the city council meeting minutes of July the 17th on a regular meeting. Number two is to consider adopting resolution number 1816, ordering a general election for the city of Granbury to be held on November 6, 2018, the purpose of the electing council people for place 3 and place 5, and authorizing a contract with the Hood County Election Administrator to furnish election services, equipment, personnel, early voting dates, and all other related matters. And number three is to consider accepting the Parks Board recommendation to allow the auction demolition of the Crockett News building located at Lambert Branch Park, and this has been blessed with the Historic Commission. Number four is to consider adopting ordinance number 1847, amending the general fund budget for the fiscal year 2017-2018 for these items as follows. On number five, to consider approving a purchase of two 2019 Chevrolet Tahoe police pursuit vehicles from Caldwell County out of Caldwell, Texas, in the amount of $66,340. Number six is to consider adopting resolution number 1817, authorizing the execution and delivery of a master tax exempt lease purchase agreement between the City of Granbury and All American Investment Group, LLC, for the financing of Honeywell Energy Performance Contract. Council, you've had an opportunity to look over all these items on the consent agenda. Are there any changes or any items on the consent agenda that you wish to make changes to or to remove off of the consent agenda for further deliberation? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Couch and a second by Councilman Corrigan. Council, any more discussion on the consent agenda items? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The consent agenda is approved. Next, we'll move into our deliberation agenda. That first item being a public hearing and consider approving a following FIA and a final plat. And I'm going to call upon staff member Scott Sobchak to give us an update on that. If you would, please, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Manager. We've seen this particular development as a preliminary plat a few months prior. Also, along with the preliminary plat was a rezoning request that That property has since been divided into 2 zoning districts. You can see the property highlighted in aqua color. To the west is the business commercial district, which incorporates 5 office buildings, roughly 2,280 square feet in size, and 8 multifamily buildings, which are located to the east along the shoreline, proposing 252 multifamily units. As a part of the plan development proposal, what was provided were elevations to support the rezoning request. Again, these are for your viewing. This is the final plan application. You can see the ingress-egress points and the dedicated easements on the 2 lots of record. It will have access to Loop 567. There'll be private internal water and sewer lines. If you recall, during the deliberation of the preliminary plat, there were a list of variances associated with that. One was to not upgrade Loop 567 to an urban standard curb and gutter facility. The second was a variance request to a sidewalk. That was denied by the city council at that time. As a part of this proposal, there are 2 variance requests as requested by the developer again. We have the sidewalk request that's been further vetted and researched by the developer's engineer as well as the Freeze and Nichols engineer contracted to act on behalf of the city. We have a second variance request to not extend a water main along the Loop 567 frontage. As a part of the consideration of the variance request regarding the water line, they were made aware, and the city was made aware, that there's a capital project undertaken by the city to install a 12-inch water main along 567. There was no need to replicate or duplicate the efforts. So everything else comports with the preliminary plat as presented and acted upon by City Council. The FIA is valued for construction costs a little over $1 million, I think $1,015,000. The Planning and Zoning Commission and your city staff and your city engineer report on that as they are supporting the variances as presented by the developer. I'll defer back to the developer and his engineer on substantiating their request for the variances, but you do have the variance request application in your agenda packet. Procedurally, the plat cannot be approved without the infrastructure agreement in place, the FIA. There's been some prior dialogue regarding the FIA and some of the considerations and economic benefits of having certain things provided by the city, i.e. the water line. And there was also some discussion about the off-site costs regarding the lift station upgrades for the sewer and potential economic incentives to offset some of those costs borne by the developer. So what you have in your staff report has been altered a little bit, and we'll go over that here in a minute. But we are recommending as staff approval of the FIA, conditional approval with a condition that a Chapter 380 or other economic incentive agreement be executed by and between the city of Granbury and the developer to allow for the economic incentives for upgrading and expanding the lift station and other sewer facilities along with the water main improvements. The FIA should not be finally executed until finally executed, i.e. signed, a signed Chapter 380 agreement is in place, in essence. So we didn't see in the FIA the clear linkage of the economic incentives that were discussed with the developer in the FIA agreement in and of itself. So it was thought we needed a separate economic incentive agreement more formalized before the signed FIA is processed by the mayor. So staff's recommending conditional approval of the FIA with the condition as itemized under A1. Your city staff and P&Z are recommending approval of the variances as presented, that is the sidewalk and the water line variances. Again, we have that duplication of effort, and we are recommending conditional denial of the final plat with the following conditions. that the approval of the FIA and the Chapter 380 agreement or other economic incentive agreement be executed. And to date, we don't have the park dedication fees. So as a part of the subdivision ordinance, a developer who's not dedicating a park is required to pay a fee in lieu of. In this instance, that amounts to $88,200. It's not an ordinance violation. It's just they don't pay it until they bring us the Mylars and file it. We collect it prior to filing for record. So they're aware of that. They've been in agreement to it. Just we don't have the fees yet, so we need to issue that conditional denial. So that's the summary, Mayor. For the record, we have the developer here, Mr. Ryan Voorhees. The engineer of record is Zeke Safareda. I hope I pronounced that right. And Jason Crum is the architect of record. I'll be happy to enter.
What was that first name? Ryan Horton?
Ryan Voorhees is the developer.
You lost me on one thing on the conditional agreement on the FIA. So you're saying the staff is recommending a conditional agreement on subject to a 380 being drew up, I guess you might say.
Right. So the mechanism there being, if council approves it conditionally, then it wouldn't have to come back to council.
Okay.
It's conditionally approved with the condition being that we execute an economic incentive or a 380
Okay.
agreement. Once that agreement's been executed, that condition's been met, and then the mayor would be allowed to go ahead and sign the FIA.
I see you squirming. Did you want to? Okay. Maybe you wanted to add something to that. Okay.
Mayor,
Councilman Couch.
I think it'd be enlightening if the developer came up and kind of gave us an overview.
Well, we're going to open up the public hearing and we'll try to see if we can get him.
Okay.
I just had that one question that I want to clarify my mind from what Scott had rolled out there. So at this time, I'll open up the public hearing, and I know we do have the developer and some folks there, so we'll go ahead and let them speak.
Hello, I'm Ryan Voorhees, the developer. I haven't got a whole lot to say. I think he summarized the whole project fairly well. I mean, we're in agreement with everything they've done and presented. We're just here to answer questions. We've got my engineers here as well, if you have any specific questions that he can address.
Okay. I'll go ahead and extend the public hearing. Does anybody else out in the public wish to speak on this item? If not, I'll go ahead and close that portion of it and bring it back to the council here. Council, do you have any questions for these folks right here on this? Councilman Couch?
Yes, can you kind of, is it Ryan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ryan, can you tell us a little bit more about the commercial side of what you have planned?
Commercials, I mean, it's somewhat undefined. We hope to do, I mean, we've got, like Scott mentioned, we've got 5 buildings laid out, and they'd be strip mall type buildings, for office use, but we haven't totally defined that yet. I mean, we've got to dig into it and try to figure out what's the best way to actually build those. I think that site's much stronger and going to be received better by commercial users once the apartments get up. And so that's the first stage of our project, and that's what we've been focusing on. And then the second phase will be the commercial site. We're going to do the infrastructure development. We're going to develop the pads and everything. We're just not going to go vertical until the apartments are done. So. But if you got any suggestions or ideas, we're open to anything.
Council, any more questions, concerns?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilperson Reiner.
I still have concern on the sidewalk issue. We denied that variance previously, and we've denied it for other developers. And I have concern that we're not going to be consistent with this particular issue. And I know that you want to wait until it is fully developed out there to urban standards. That's what I read, I believe. And then there's a 6-month waiting period or determination period as to, getting that sidewalk in after those standards are met. My question is, if we don't start doing this now, what is the benefit of waiting? If we're telling other folks that they can't have this variance, help me understand why we should do this.
Well, I think, first of all, I think we really attempted to install that sidewalk. I mean, that was our intent. I know when we were in front of the council several months ago, we we heard what, your concerns, and we tried to accommodate those concerns, but that there's some physical constraints, and my engineer can speak more specifically to it, but there's no practical, safe way to install that sidewalk. Zeke, do you want to jump in there, and he can address it better?
Hi, my name is Zeke Saavedra, and like Ryan discussed earlier, he was open to constructing the sidewalk. Looking at it from an engineering perspective, the timing of constructing the sidewalk is just not, the best time isn't right now, especially because we would be leading pedestrians to the railroad without a way to cross the railroad. Therefore, if a disabled person were to use that sidewalk, the chances are that they could perhaps decide to cross the railroad instead of turning back around. So it could potentially lead somebody to danger. So that's why we decided at the present time it's better to postpone the sidewalk. It's not a true variance in the way that it will eventually be constructed. It's just the timing of it is just not right now, or not recommended.
I guess my question with that regard is there a possibility of some sort of compromise where we build the sidewalk and moving forward everybody else does the same, but there are signage issues we could take care of as far as warning signs, things like that. I've seen that done before. I'm not legally versed in those
Sure.
in that arena, but I think that might be a possibility. I'm just having a hard time denying somebody else and allowing others to do.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing, I think there's some study perhaps that you presented, but it creates a lot of serious liability for both the city and for me as a developer. And there's, I guess there's instances where people were injured in these types of settings where they were led into, regardless whether it's signed or not. Again, it's just a situation where it creates a liability for both you and me, and it just didn't seem appropriate. I think the city engineer was in agreement, and I think he was one that actually came to the conclusion that we needed to discourage the construction of that sidewalk. So that conversation was started by the city engineer, and then we picked up on it and accepted it.
Well, we both were discussing about it, because the other option is building it up next to the road, which right now it's considered a high-speed, corridor. We would need to install a curb and gutter, and the limits of the bridge extend beyond the property. Therefore, it turns into a bigger kind of public works job that the timing again wasn't necessarily right for this job. But as far as this document, I was the one who found it, because we were trying to figure out the way to either construct it or not, right? And we really just, the Federal Highway Administration produced a document basically discouraging, this type of scenario where you lead pedestrians to a path of, no turnaround, because they could potentially, get hurt. So.
My other question, if you don't mind, I have a hard time putting the onus on the new owner if you ever decide to sell that property. We don't know exactly the timing of when 567 will be completed to urban standards. And if you happen to sell that property and it's not disclosed properly for some reason, then it could potentially cost the city to track those folks down and make sure that they bring that sidewalk up to standard.
In other jurisdictions, we've dealt with similar situations. We call it a deferred improvement agreement, and I'm not sure of the mechanics in the city of Granbury, but perhaps it could be a recorded agreement against the property, so it's disclosed to a future property owner.
So that notation is proposed to be recorded on a plat and filed for record at the clerk's office. And typically we've done that for infrastructure improvements, either delayed curb and gutter section or delayed water sewer extensions along properties. So one would think that as part of title discovery, going to the courthouse and looking at the recorded plat, the formal document that creates that legitimate lot of record, and that note is clearly identified, that's conveyed to the purchaser.
If it makes any difference, we're developing these with the intent of holding, I'm not saying we're gonna hold them forever, but, you know, we don't foresee selling those. But the other thing too is that we have dealt with deferred improvement agreements, you know, many times. So it's not an atypical situation, so.
What changes later on? What makes it safer later on?
So later on, what will happen is eventually, as the city grows, the road will be widened and converted to a more urban section, which, I can't speak for TxDOT, but typically what happens as towns develop, the roads get wider and they make provisions for pedestrians to.
It don't happen very quick.
I might just add that we did approve a variance request to not bring it up to urban standards, which means curb and gutter and that type of infrastructure, because it is on a loop or an FM road, and which we normally do, but you have been pretty particular about the sidewalk. So I would, I don't know the answer to this question for you, but I would like to ask you, where's the gate? I thought this was a gated community, and maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I misunderstood that. Is it gated?
Yes, the multifamily portion will be gated. So it's, let's see, as you come off of Loop 567 down the main drive and you pass the commercial portion of the property, and you pass the clubhouse, you'll see the first gate right there where the pointer is. And
Okay.
And there's another one on the southern drive as well as you leave the multifamily site.
Thank you.
Council, any more discussion, any more questions for the gentleman?
Scott, can you expand some of this printed information on that for us, on that elevation? Not, those charts there. I'd like to kind of see how big these apartments are.
Top.
Just for everybody in the audience to understand what we're incentivizing with money. Doesn't really expand it, doesn't magnify it. Oh.
No, unfortunately.
Do you have an idea of how big these apartments are?
Each building itself is roughly 60 feet by 180 feet long, so 60 feet wide by 180 long.
And there's going to be how many units in each building?
Well, there's two building types, two different building types. I think one of them has 36 units and one has 30 units. They all have a similar footprint, but
The square footage, what, 900 feet?
Roughly, well, the total square footage on the building is about, conditioned area is about 24,000 square feet per building. This project, we've weighted it towards more one-bedroom units. It's about 66% one-bedroom.
Okay.
And then, one-third two-bedroom. So it's a little different mix. We find that that's kind of what the market demands right now.
And what's the typical square footage for the one-bedroom and the two-bedroom?
They range from about 7 to 850 on the one-bedroom. The two-bedrooms range from about 900 to 1100.
Okay. Thank you.
But we do them a little, I think we've discussed before, we've constructed them a little bit to more of a upper scale standard. We use laminate flooring and bigger baseboards and two-tone paint and granite countertops and all those type of things. We've got a large pool laid out, kind of so we try to amenitize the project and do them a little nicer than the typical apartment project.
Mr. Mayor.
I think I'm gonna help Ms. Reiner out here a little bit. I think that as I listen to this issue in the sidewalk, that before we even get to an urban standard, we're going to be seeing other development there, and we're going to be faced with the same issue of getting sidewalks with other folks. I think that's going to happen before this urban standard comes in effect, and so that's what I'm thinking. Just bite the bullet and put the sidewalks to start with, because there are going to be other developments that come in that we're going to have to tie into. I think it's where you're going with this, right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, we're going to be faced with having other people stand up there and say, well, this one didn't have a sidewalk, so why are we putting a sidewalk? What are we connected to? It's got to start somewhere. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. getting there, but I actually, and the reason that I'm so concerned about this is because just yesterday, I was approached by a resident of our town, and he was questioning why there are not sidewalks. We have lovely sidewalks now on our downtown square, but no sidewalks or limited amount of sidewalks going out of the square. So it's, you can't walk from the square, say, down to Joe's Pizza safely. And so, we're trying to retrofit or think about retrofitting in the future sidewalks. So now you are going to be in the same position in the future that we are right here on the square right now. And I walked my own neighborhood last night, and we have, as houses are going in, they're doing construction right behind my house. As houses are going in, they're putting in those sidewalks, and they connect to nowhere. And I understand it goes directly to a railroad, and actually I was going to ask for my own edification if anything is being done about that as a safety measure currently. Are we addressing that somehow in the future, right now? I don't have an answer to that, so I'd like to.
Do you have an answer to that, Scott? We have not talked to anybody other than I called TxDOT and asked them why they didn't put it in, and they said because it's a loop. We don't typically do it on a loop. And I think it was out in the county when they did that as well.
I think the concern again is if, for instance, my tenants are using that sidewalk, they run to the railroad track, they jump over the railroad tracks and continue on into town, and that's what you want to discourage. It is a hazard, but I understand your concern, and perhaps one way around it is actually, maybe we could post the money for it, put it in a bond of some sort, so at some later date you could tap into it and construct it. But I have concerns about constructing a sidewalk that runs into a railroad track. It's not appropriate.
That's understandable. That was another part of my concern, was the length of time that it was going to take to get to this sidewalk issue. If we wait for urban standards to happen, as the mayor stated, we don't know when that's going to happen. So then we have, the issue of no sidewalk and people developing and coming back and asking us, well, okay, you did it for them, why aren't you doing it for us? To me, that's a pretty big problem. And I think we need a standard going forward. I'm just throwing it out there, where we're addressing this right up front.
But I guess, again, I hate to interrupt, but I really think addressing it by requiring future installation is a practical way to do it as well. I mean, it's an obligation that landowner has that can be called on anytime it needs to be called on. That is addressing it, but short of physically building that sidewalk, which I don't think is appropriate at this time.
Mayor, I have a question,
Councilman Allen.
if you do.
Oh, I'm sorry.
First, thank y'all for coming to Granbury. Our company's building a house out past y'all, and I enjoy going by there and seeing the dirt and the work going on. I know how sidewalks are. They're a pain a lot of times. Look at this picture, and if you'll pull it back, Scott, where you showed the sidewalk going up the hillside. And I'm not saying I'm against them. I'm not saying I'm for sidewalks, but I just want to point something out. You had another one. Flip it back one more. Oh, went too far. Maybe it's the other way. Well, the one I looked at a while ago, maybe it's on my iPad. It showed it going up the hillside, the sidewalk. Is that correct? From your development.
That was the driveway, sir. The main drive into the.
And that's going to be at a pretty good slope.
That's right. Yes, it exceeds the sidewalk maximum slope.
So what scares me about, and this is just my personal opinion, putting the sidewalks up there, kids that live in those apartments are going to get on their skateboard and go. I won't do it, folks. Don't worry. But I'm telling you, I think some people could get hurt, and I think the liability on y'all. I don't think the city would have any liability, would we, Jeremy?
Potentially, yes.
We would have. That's the only thing that scares me. I think the building and stuff, I agree with everybody up here. And we have voted before in the past to let somebody get by without a sidewalk. They might be in an old neighborhood that didn't have sidewalks. They built a new home. But on the other hand, I think that we lost a business about a year ago or maybe less because we required them to put sidewalks in, In their case, it wouldn't fit on the property. Y'all's will, and I agree with the sidewalks except to where it goes up the hill. I just think it'd just be costing y'all a lot of problems. You're not gonna get your final on them till you do what you say you're gonna do anyway. And I'm sure you're gonna have a bond up for cash for us, so they gotta do it. If they say they're gonna do the sidewalk, they gotta put it in, or they don't get the final. Is that right, Scott, or not?
You know, it depends on how this variance and council's motion is structured, I guess. What's being requested right now is just to put the note on the plat and record it in lieu of. We've had these notes, you know, there's this big push to have sidewalks agreed, but each particular piece of property has its own particular nuances, and we've had the design engineer and our city engineer reflect on those topographical challenges and the safety concerns, and that's their presentation to you, is to have the note in lieu of. One thing that was brought up by Mr. Voorhees, and one of the benefits of the note is you get the then construction dollars as opposed to posting money now, where construction costs change if you escrow the money now or put it into the city coffers, as opposed to if in the event it goes to an urban standard down the line and that note is tied to the property, then you get the more current dollars, more actual practical dollars of what it costs to construct the improvements.
Mayor.
Councilman Couch?
Scott, could we design this to where we could be assured of the funding would be there when the sidewalk is ready, and the trigger would be the adjacent development on either side would trigger the sidewalk construction?
You can do anything you want, council.
Well, that way, you know, someone comes in on either side and decides to develop, then they can be assured that, yeah, we're going to demand that you put your own sidewalk in, but now it triggers this property to put their sidewalk in as well.
Is that what you was talking about on a preferred agreement, or what the agreement you're talking about, or?
Well, again, it depends on how you structure it, and what Scott's proposing is the agreement is just in the form of a note on the map that binds us or obligates us to do that. You can do it with just a small contract between the developer and the city, you know, where we're promising to do it as well. There's different ways to do it. You know, the other way, you could physically bond it, or you could post. It's not a huge dollar item. You know, it's really, so we're not arguing over the cost so much. We're arguing over the practicality of doing it now. And I've got serious concerns. I've been developing property for 30 years, and I've learned the hard way that I get named in all these type of lawsuits, and if somebody does get hurt, I get named along with the city. So it does create liability that's unwarranted. It doesn't need to be there. You know, you're only talking about a few $1,000s for the concrete work. It's not a huge dollar item again. So.
Right now, if there's a reluctance to pay, if there's say a future purchaser acquires the property, there's verbiage in the note that says if in the event that we can't collect after notification, that the city has a latitude to place a lien on the property to recover costs.
Scott, can you point on that map where that sidewalk would be, that if it was required?
So I can tell you where the ordinance requires it.
That's what we need.
Yes.
That's what we need.
So our ordinance requires that the sidewalk, of course, where it's contemplating an urban standard facility. So for residential, you have 5 foot of open space behind the back of curb, and then you have a 4-foot sidewalk. For commercial, you have a 5-foot sidewalk behind the back of curb. The mere fact that this is not your standard urban template has, lends itself to kind of a partial variance in and of itself. We see these all the time on 377 where, you have the shoulder and the bar ditch, and then you have the development on the opposite side of the bar ditch. So you're seeing like around HEB and some of the development around that retail node, sidewalks internal to the property that are on the interior side of the bar ditch because they can't meet that behind the back of curb standard. So they're still requesting either a variance to not place it and do the urban standard when TxDOT comes in and changes hopefully someday in the next near term, 4 lanes to 6 lanes with an urban standard facility. Then that note in that instance would apply. They would go ahead and put that sidewalk in behind the back of the curb. Or no, go ahead and meet the standard. We want some connectivity. And in a lot of instances, we see that sidewalk internal to the property behind the bar ditch, or the bar ditch. So it wouldn't apply because they would still need a partial variance. There's no curb section here to place that sidewalk on.
Is there sidewalk or walkability between the residential and the commercial internally in this design?
In the development?
Yes, there is.
Okay. So I kind of pointed where I think that sidewalk, oh, my arrow didn't do it. There it went. Can't get the arrow, but along that dotted line, is that where the sidewalk would be?
It would be. That green line is roughly where that sidewalk will be installed. And what
Okay.
Mr. Allen pointed out is that it does create an issue because you're terminating in a private section of that driveway with a pretty steep slope. The other challenge on this sidewalk is that you've got to install sidewalks for ADA requirements with 2% maximum slopes and so on. So, we'd have to overcome it. It's an engineering challenge. You got to figure out how to install it and make it work so it's handicap accessible. So.
Well, your parking lot has that same standard too.
That's correct.
Intersection at the street, the entryway there. So I don't, what I'm trying to get at is, I understand. The issue is we're trying to get walkability in our neighborhood, and the loop is not designed for that, and the bridge would need like a Jersey barrier to prevent the cars from hitting pedestrians, and somehow that sidewalk would have to get up to that bridge to be able to be used. So I don't see that following that black line where that green is there is gonna get it up by the roadway where you need it, but at the same time, our ordinance is our ordinance, and you probably put a fence or something at the end of that sidewalk to keep people from going into the railroad track.
Guardrail, yeah.
So I don't know. It's up to y'all.
I mean, that's a simple, I would think, because you see it all the time where there's a sidewalk that ends at a guardrail because it says that's the end of your walking, So that's not I don't see that. What's the slope right here?
It's pretty steep.
It's steep,
Right there, real steep.
very steep.
It was the overpass design.
Right, but then it levels out up in here.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Well, Mayor, I'm in favor of making the trigger on that sidewalk based on the development of the adjacent property on either side, and approving the project as presented with, was it one conditional, with the 2 conditional denials.
So we need to do the FIA first, right, Scott, and then the final.
Correct, Mayor. If we may.
So the FIA would include include the agreement then, right? Is that with the sidewalk?
Well, the FIA believe doesn't have anything to do with the sidewalk.
Okay.
The sidewalk is tied to the plat application.
Okay, plat.
And needs to be voted on independently. But if we can act on the FIA first.
So we'll have to act on the FIA first, and then when we get down to the final plat, then we can include an agreement. Is that what you're saying? To put in that, the final plat. Okay. So if there's no more questions or anything for these folks, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the said FIA
So moved.
with.
And that's with condition 1, as stipulated on your screen, that an economic incentive agreement needs to be executed between the developer and the city.
Right, so we'll entertain a motion for the approval of the FAA with the conditional approval of the 380 agreement at a later date.
Second.
So we got a motion from Mr. Couch.
Yes.
And a second by Councilman Allen. Any more discussion on the FIA, council? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. That is approved. Next, we'll entertain the final plat. Is there any more discussion on the final plat, council?
Mayor, if we may, before we approve the plat, we need to act on the variances first before we act on the plat.
Okay.
So we have two variances, one to the central water main along 567. Your staff is recommending, and P&Z is recommending approval of not having the developer to provide a central water main along 567 because it'll be provided by the city under a capital project. The second variance is to the sidewalk standards. They're asking in their application to not place one, to place the note in lieu of, and your P&Z and your city engineer are recommending approval as presented by the developer as well.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Ryder?
would this be where we would add in Mr. Couch's?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're going to go ahead and act on these two variances, and the one being the sidewalk variance, and so we'll act on that one too, right?
Yes, sir.
So with that said, I'll entertain a motion to accept the variances as stated, and to add a contract to the sidewalk variance for a later date. Or, I'm sorry, an agreement.
Can I include that in the 380 agreement, Scott?
That the adjacency of the adjoining property.
Right. That way we just have one agreement to do it the next meeting and it's done.
So we probably need to we've got an application on the sidewalk variance. We probably need to pour it out.
That's what they're talking about here.
Okay.
Right.
They're talking about trigger them putting in their sidewalk when their neighbor
When the
on
first
either side
neighbor
developed. And
doesn't
I'm
have
asking, can we put that caveat in the 380 agreement?
I would like, personally, I mean, it's up to the attorney, but I would like to see it because there's a variance process to the design standards in the subdivision ordinance that is an application and part of a plat application and not an economic incentive agreement. That's my perspective on it.
So you need another agreement?
No, just any motion on the variance that's presented by this applicant. So we can split these variances up, probably make it a little easier.
That's what we're doing.
Okay, so
Mr.
we'll,
Mayor, I'm having a sidebar over here with our attorney, and it appears that we can potentially do the 380 agreement and the additional agreement and still not have to have them come back to council with both of those. Is that what I'm
I would rather
understanding?
come back next meeting.
Uh,
I would rather bring the agreements back on the
Okay.
next meeting. If there's agreements.
I think there's a consensus of that, so how do we proceed?
So we need to make a motion to approve the variances, and obviously there's no issues with the water main one, but there is an issue with the sidewalk variance. So we need to clarify that to go ahead and approve those two variances, right?
so my recommendation is to act on the water variance first, and then let's migrate over to the sidewalk.
Okay.
And deal with it.
So let's go ahead and get the water main variance. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the said variance and to not extend the 8-inch water main through the loop 567.
So moved.
Second.
And I have a motion by Councilperson Reiner and a second by Councilman Couch. Any more discussion on that variance? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. That one is approved. Now we'll go into the sidewalk variance. And council, we need some language on that motion on the sidewalk variance to add to approval of that variance. And Councilman Couch, I think you had that you'd like to add to that variance that it be put in place as soon as any other.
Instead of waiting for the urban design upgrades to be
Right.
made, you're recommending it be done when the neighboring property owner develops.
Developed.
All right, so I think the only variance then would be that it would be a postponement of the installation of the sidewalk
Right.
until either side of the property is developed. Will that work?
That works, that works.
That's my motion.
That's your motion. So we have a motion to,
Let's
for
ask
the-
Scott.
So my question is, do we want to add that into the current note, that either it goes to an urban standard facility or when the adjoining property owner develops? And
Whatever
just-
happens first.
Yeah,
yeah,
is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
And we can actually just add that language onto the note on the plat and record it?
well, we're assuming that's what we
Okay.
can do, yeah.
Okay.
Or do you want another separate agreement?
That's what I'm
Okay.
asking, yeah.
Add that on to it.
Do I need to restate that?
Yes, please.
Okay. I withdraw my other motion, and I'd like to make this motion to postpone the installation of the sidewalks until either side is developed or the urban standards is implemented, whichever one is first.
You okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Second.
And so we have a motion by Councilman Couch and a second by Councilman Corrigan. I'll give you that one, Greg. Any more discussion, council? All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. That variance is approved. Now we'll go into the plat, the final plat. And there's nothing attached to that, right, Scott?
Your city staff and P&Z are recommending conditional denial of the
Okay.
final plat with the two conditions that an FIA and economic incentive agreement be presented and executed, and that the park fees be filed with the city.
So council, you've got that on the final plat, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the final plat with the said conditions.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Allen and a second by Councilperson Reiner
Conditional denial, right?
Conditional
Right.
denial.
with the conditional denial. Any more discussion on the final plat? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. That is approved. Folks, thanks for working with us on that. We hope that is a doable thing. Our next item is a public hearing to consider approving a request of the CJB Development for a variance. And I'm going to call upon, I guess, Scott or Jim. Do you? Okay.
I think Jim was going to respond to this, but very quickly, I know the notice or the caption doesn't really specify where it is. It gives the general location. This is for the Saratoga development.
Saratoga Development, right.
Correct. And I will yield back to you for Mr. Cook.
I'll call on Jim Cook to address this. Our building official. Thank you, Jim.
We support the variance request.
The mic.
We support the variance request because they want to build 2 8-unit buildings. And we can only, by ordinance, approve up to 10% without the variance. So I think we win because we get a water line that loops the entire system, so it's better for the city, and we support it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. So council, you had a chance to look at that. So at this time, I'll open up the public hearing. Anybody in the public want to speak on this item? Not, I'll close the public hearing. Council, do you have any questions for Jim, Scott, or Chris on this item?
Mayor,
Councilman Allen.
I'd like to excuse myself on this one.
For what reasons?
I've got a conflict there.
Okay.
Thank you.
So with Mr. Allen excused, still got a quorum here. So council, any more discussion on this item? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the variance of the said variance.
So moved.
I've got a motion by Councilman Corrigan
Second.
and a second by Councilperson Reiner. Any more discussion, council? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. That is approved. Mr. Kaufman will retrieve Mr. Allen there. Our next item is a public hearing to consider adopting ordinance number 1848. Once again, I'd like to call upon Scott Sobchak to give us a update on that one, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The property in question is fronting Bridge Street. It's zoned single-family R8.4. This is the property located immediately behind the Arbor House that's operating as a bed and breakfast facility. The applicant, Ms. Nivens, would also like to operate this facility as a bed and breakfast, 3 guest suite hosted bed and breakfast. During the discussions at P&Z, there was some discussion regarding a little bit of parking requirements and some of the improvements to the site. Our zoning ordinance requires 5 parking spaces, 2 for the primary use, which is single-family residential. You need 2 spaces on site, and then 1 for each guest suite made available. So a total of 5 is needed. You can see by the site plan, only 3 are able to fit on site. There will be a joint parking agreement with the property to the south, Arbor House, and the 2 properties will be working jointly with one another. City staff recommended at the Planning and Zoning Commission an itemized list of conditions to be tied to the property and the operation of this. First, that the parking shall be installed and inspected prior to the operation of the B&B. Currently, there's no striping. Supplemental standards 1 and 17 from the zoning ordinance applies. That's just for the operation of the B&B in and of itself, like wired smoke alarms. Specific use permit shall automatically expire after 1 year from council approval. A new site. Only 3 bedrooms of the residence will be used for overnight guests per the zoning ordinance requirement because of the parking tie. And the primary use of the property will be used for single-family residential. The residence shall be occupied for a permanent residence by either an owner or renter manager. So because it's operating as a hosted B&B facility, it can't be unhosted. You have a cap of only 2 guest suites in that particular category for single-family residential. Those were the 5 that were approved by P&Z. The parking issue came up during and a little bit after during staff. One of my planning staff members, Shad Roten, reached out to the applicant and asked whether or not we could actually button hook by a letter joint use parking agreement to the Arbor House. They have 2 to give, so it equals everything out insofar as parking. Roll that into the adoption ordinance. That way, if those properties are ever severed, then it voids out the SUP because they don't have the parking to support it. The applicant was agreeable to that, so that's condition number 6. The issuance of the SUP is automatically revoked upon termination of shared parking agreement. So that's my summary, Mayor. I'll be happy to entertain any questions. The applicant, I believe, is in the audience, Ms. Nivens, and be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Scott. This is a public hearing. At this time, I'll open the public hearing up. Is anybody in the public wish to speak on this item? We do have the applicant in the audience, right? Not, I'll close the public hearing. Council, do you have any more discussion or any questions for Scott on this item?
Mayor.
Councilman Corrigan?
Scott, I didn't see in the packet where it specifically notated a pass-through or how whoever's going to be parking at the Arbor House is going to get through to the property. Did I miss that, or is it?
You're correct. We didn't go into that detail. Maybe Ms. Nivens can address that if there's a walkway or a fence or a gate between the 2 properties. I know the prior owner, before Ms. Nivens acquired it, operated prior the 2 properties jointly, and there was a walkway, but just need to make sure on record that that still exists.
Yes, I'm Vicki Nivens, and there will be a walkway that adjoins both properties.
Okay. All right, because that would be my biggest concern as we approve this, and that's all well and good, but at some point someone decides, I really don't want to walk that far and end up parking in the street, and then you've got other issues as far as traffic control. So.
Mm-hmm. No, there should be enough parking with both parking lots. And we will monitor that as well, too.
Okay, perfect.
Council, any more questions, concerns for the applicant or Scott? Thank you, Vicki.
Mm-hmm.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the said SUP with the conditions, parking, the supplemental standard, the specific use automatically expire in 1 year, and only 3 bedrooms for the residents, and the primary use of the property will be for single family, and also number 6, the assurance of the SUP will automatically revoke upon the termination of the shared parking agreement.
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Couch
Second.
and a second by Councilman Corrigan. Council, any more discussion on this? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. That is approved. Our next item is a public hearing and consider adopting ordinance number 1849, and we'll call upon Scott Sobchak to, again, give us a briefing on that one.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. What's being proposed by the applicant is to add a secondary structure or an accessory structure to the Holly Hill Cemetery. Currently, there is no place for restroom facilities or to conduct monument sales. So what's being proposed by the applicant is a placement of a secondary structure to conduct such activity. The property was annexed in 2006, and as such, it was placed in an interim holding status. Our zoning ordinance requires an SUP with a site plan in interim holding for cemeteries. So that's why you see it as an SUP before you. It has a site plan component. The applicant has provided this showing where generally that proposed new sales building will be. During the deliberations at P&Z, it was discussed by the applicant that these new restrooms will also be ADA compliant, which is a good thing. This is just a minor site plan amendment to currently what's out there, and it gets them legitimate with our zoning ordinance by having an SUP on the books in interim holding. Notices were sent out to adjoining property owners. It was advertised in the newspaper. There were no comments received from the by the planning department against or for the proposal. Your Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval unanimously as presented by the applicant.
Thank you, Scott. This is a public hearing. At this time, I'll open up the public hearing. Anybody in the public wish to speak on this item? Not, I'll close the public hearing. Council, do you have any questions for Scott on this item? In discussion?
Mayor, I got one.
Councilman Allen.
The first deal said add new building or structures, expanding existing building or structures on the land. Do they have room enough to make it bigger?
They're placing a new building on site, not expanding one.
I'm going by item number 1.
Oh, so what that is on the items 1 through 6 is evidence of expanding a nonconformity. So what that's saying is they have to submit an SUP as opposed to being able to permit a building without doing an SUP. So that's part of the staff report saying because they're expanding a nonconformity, it kicks them into an SUP submittal requirement to get right with our zoning ordinance. So they are doing actually 1, 3, and 6, adding a new building, adding impervious cover, and adding any new physical or tangible improvement to the land.
Are there going to be merchandising outdoor? So
Yep.
addressed?
Yep. Nelda, I didn't even see you sitting back there. I haven't seen you in so long. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Mayor. I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand all of your questions.
Go ahead and introduce yourself,
Oh,
Nelda, for the record.
I'm
if you would,
Nelda
please.
Wiley-Bacon, and I'm cemetery manager of
So
Holly Hills.
Are you going to be merchandising headstones outside the building? And is this addressed in this permit, Scott?
At the present time, no, we won't have headstones out there. We do have some in the cemetery, and of course, we have the books we will be selling from the building,
Yeah.
but not, we'll be selling lots and monuments, but not, we won't have them sitting around like
Outside.
outside. There are some available in the cemetery that, you know, we can just take them and show them those, plus from the catalogs.
I didn't want it to sneak up and get us after all this is over.
Right.
And why-
No, we intend for it to be very nice. There was an existing building. It was just a trailer, and it was in poor shape and had a small restroom in it, and it has been since demolished.
So there's actually plumbing out there of some sort?
We have septic tanks out there, and we had to build around the septic tanks. We have an open area in the back, is the way they had it, a carport-like, so that we couldn't build over the septic tanks. We really wanted to build over them and just have the external cleaning device, but I think,
You're gonna use the existing
We're gonna
septic.
use existing
Y'all already
septic.
vetted all that, Scott.
That's, yeah, the building department and specifically, I guess, our registered sanitarian is going to make sure that septic system is still active. Yeah.
it is. It's still workable.
Well, thank you, Nelda. Council, any more questions for Nelda or Scott on this issue? Thank you. If no more questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the said SUP.
So moved.
I got a motion by Councilman Couch
Second.
and a second by Councilman Corrigan. Council, any more discussion on this item? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. That is approved. Our next item is a public hearing. Consider adopting ordinance number 1850. Once again, we'll call upon Scott Sopcich to brief the council.
Thank you, Mayor. These are a few housekeeping issues that staff looked into insofar as just clarifying the zoning ordinance relative to some applications that we've seen recently over the past few months. First is we recognize an issue, and then we look at the zoning ordinance to see how clear it is and whether or not it could be made clearer. We have, for example, a couple of definitions in Article 4, our land use matrix, for storage yards and contractor shops. And outside of that, plumbers, for whatever reason in our zoning ordinance, are treated differently. Contractor yards with storage yards and plumber shops. Plumber shops, for example, require an industrial with an SUP, I believe. And contractors' yards are allowed in heavy commercial. So plumbing shops with and related service are industrial by right, and contractor shops are allowed in heavy commercial. So there's no reason to treat them differently from one another when they have a call-in office and a storage yard and a place to park their trucks. So what our proposal was to Planning and Zoning Commission is to treat them similarly and just roll them into the definition of contractor shop, and then treat the two with two distinct kind of operations. Either you have a storage yard or you don't, more of a call office. One can go into light commercial with an SUP and a heavy commercial by right, and the other with the storage yard requires an SUP and heavy commercial and by right industrial, because there may be a pipe yard out there, for example, or spools of wire for an electrical contractor. So that's the proposal, is to distinguish contractors' yards with and without storage, and then roll plumbing into the contractor's shop and treating them similarly as we would with HVAC and other contractors. And then we have a definition for printing and reprographic shop, but we don't have a category in Article 4. So we've always treated those as retail. Just historically, when we issued COs in the past, we just need a definition. And again, we're cataloging those by right in the same zoning districts that we would office and retail, for example. LC, HC, and I, and CBD by right. So that's amendment number 1, just some clarifications. Amendment number 2 is adding in contractor shop, no outside storage, and contractor shop with outside storage. And you can see in the definitions under Article 12 that we're lumping in plumbing with electrical, mechanical, or similar type activities. Again, just clarifying the definitions. Amendment number 3 is our sign corridor map. One of the things that we haven't done is to include the new right-of-way for the northeast loop into the sign corridor map as that area develops. We need to give further allowance to have equity in the treatment and the application of signs along the loop as we would for the northwest loop that's currently in the city. So in essence, the zoning ordinance just draws that corridor B purple line around the northeast loop. And what that does is that gives the property owners more height and more commercial advertising area because the speeds are higher, and treats them similarly to the northwest loop. Amendment number 4 does the same with the landscaping corridor map and requires that buffer. And we're treating that the same as we would the northwest loop. You can see the northwest loop on the existing map. We're just extending that on the proposed map to include the northeast loop as well, to create that 10-foot landscape buffer. So all these we're feeling are a little more developer friendly, getting, especially the sign, we're giving them a little more advertising area, more height. Currently, right now, if somebody was in the city along the northeast loop, they would be limited to a 7-foot sign for a single lot. Right, with the proposed changes, they'd be allowed a 10-foot sign for a single user and 120 square foot of advertising area as opposed to 75 square foot. So your Planning and Zoning Commission recognized this based on staff's recommendation and unanimously recommended approval of the 4 amendments as presented by staff.
Thank you, Scott. This is a public hearing. At this time, I'll open up the public hearing to the public. Anybody in the public wish to speak on this item? Not, I'll close the public hearing. Council, do you have any questions or concerns to Scott on this item? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the said ordinance with all the changes.
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Corrigan.
Second.
And a second by Councilperson Reiner. Council, any more discussion on these ordinances? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. That is approved. Our next item is a public hearing and consider adopting ordinance number 1851. We'll call upon Scott Sopcich once again.
Mayor, Council, again, these are a series of amendments that are just housekeeping type activities. Amendment number 1, and this is of the subdivision ordinance, increases the preliminary plat validity term from 6 months to a year, and also clarifies the preliminary plat administrative approval requirement. Currently in our preliminary plat, once council approves the preliminary plat, they have 6 months in order to get their engineering done prior to filing a final plat application. Now, the ordinance also rolls in a one-time 6-month DRC approval process, but what we found in the past, especially for larger subdivisions coming in, these engineering plans take a little more than 6 months to process and get through. So what city staff is recommending is approving a ordinance amendment allowing for a longer term, that the validity of the preliminary plat shall be extended 2 years from the approval date of the final plat, or shall expire 1 year after the date of approval by council unless a pre-application of final plat's filed. So we're going from 6 months to 1 year, and then a one-time 6-month extension to be granted by DRC. So it gives them 6 more months for the plans. This also clarifies the administrative approval process. So once council approves a preliminary plat, for example, sometimes there's changes in the design. Some of those changes may be substantial, like there's impact on the city's infrastructure that council needs to be aware of. Those will still need to go to council. Some are more clerical, like all they want to do is move a phase line. And they're not changing the lots, they're not changing the infrastructure demand, or they're reconfiguring a lot and the demand on the infrastructure and service delivery is the same. What we've done in the past is say, okay, that's just a minor clarification, moving that line, and it'll be discovered at the final plat process when we go to council, because they'll still have to go to council and P&Z council to say, here's phase one. And oh, by the way, we've included these 2 lots from phase 2. So we're in essence writing that administrative approval process, that there is a way to get staff approvals on an amended preliminary plat, provided that these are clerical and that it doesn't change the density or the demand on the infrastructure, doesn't alter any results of the TIA if one's presented, that the engineer's fine with it, and it's a way for them to actually get through the process a little easier, a little more developer friendly. So that's the amendment number 1. Any questions on that? Amendment number 2, remove conflicting language and clarify that tax certificates are due with all recorded plats. This is just a clerical issue that, we always reach out, try as much as possible to reach out to the developer before they bring the Mylars in, that they have to have the tax certificate, and it's with the red stamp, prior to it being filed for record at the county courthouse. The few instances that we have had with the county clerk is they reject them without that tax cert. We try to vet that out up front. Yes.
Scott, isn't that the state law?
Yes. Amendment number 3. This reflects on the park dedication requirements in the subdivision ordinance. Currently, our park dedication requirements states that up to 75% of the land dedicated for public park can be in a floodplain. We've had some recommendations in a park master plan, and there were some discussions with our parks director and the parks board based on those recommendations that be changed from 75% to 50%. The park board supported that. That park board recommendation was supported by P&Z after the advocacy was reported to them. And those 2 boards are reporting to you that they want to be consistent with the Parks Master Plan and change that from 75% to 50%. Also, as a matter of clarification, in the park section of the subdivision ordinance, we had the old title of Keith Callahan, which was Community Services Director. That's being changed to City Park Director. And Park Director gets involved when a developer submits a conceptual design of a park. We send it over to the park director, they take it to the park board, and they work with the developer on designing the park, where the sidewalks are going, where the parking's going, et cetera. And we just want to make sure that we're current with the organizational chart in referencing the park director's involvement. Any questions on the park changes? Okay. Amendment number 4. And amendment number 5, I'll work through these jointly. Amendment number 4 and 5 pertain to the requirements of dedicating easements, particularly in side yards where we have utility easements. And we have found over time that appurtenances have been constructed. What I mean by appurtenances is like pool pumps and HVAC compressors and landscaping and fences that aren't tied to the property as part of the building footprint, but are tied to the building as an attachment. Sometimes are in these easements, and we have very strong language currently in our owner certificate that says none of these appurtenances, fences, or landscaping can be in easements. So we're proposing changes to the subdivision ordinance that says in these easements that these types of items can be placed in the easement, but they're at the sole risk of the property owner. And this list was helped constructed by Chris, and may want to go into this detailed list a little bit, but these are happening in the city currently, and this change is an allowance to at least maintain them legitimately. But if in the event if a franchise utility or the city needs to get into the easement, then the removal, and there's no obligation to relocate it, the removal and relocation of it is done at the property owner expense. And that's further strengthened in the new owner certificate language, which is highlighted in yellow, which states that any fences, trees, shrubs, or other improvements or growth which are placed at the sole risk of the property owner or the builder, and which may endanger or interfere with the construction, maintenance, or efficiency of their respective system or dedicated areas, is done at the sole risk of the property owner. Additionally, the city of Granbury, Hood County, or franchise utility may request the owner to file a lien against the property that will cover cost of such removal or replacement. So, your Planning and Zoning Commission was presented with these changes that are highlighted before you and recommended approval unanimously by a vote of 6-0. Be happy to entertain any questions.
Scott, there's a lot of yellow on here, but the thing that concerns me is there folks out there, there's business out there that they're not in compliance with this, that we're going to have issues with?
Yes.
Yes.
In fact, I drove around and saw this violation all over, and that's why I made the recommendation to add these changes, so that, in the words of Edmund Burke, that famous English philosopher of 1800s, you cannot indict all of society. So we're trying to make the rules fit what's happened here.
So you've got a plan on doing that?
Right there.
Do what?
I said, we approved this. If they already like that, it's nothing.
Right.
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 They're legal.
Thank y'all.
Yeah, just cleaning a little bit up.
Mr. Allen, you see that stuff all over the place too, don't you?
Yes, sir.
I know you do.
I do have a question there.
Go ahead.
Scott, on 336, it's talking about putting a fence over an easement. You can put a fence over as long as you have a 5-foot gate.
There's no mention of gates, and I think the fence is still at the risk of the property owner. But if a franchise utility or a city needs to get through there, then they have the latitude to remove that fence out of the easement area, is the way I read this.
If they have a problem.
If they have a problem.
Yeah, okay. Still the same. You know, I'm like the mayor, it's a lot of yellow, but a lot of this needs to be done. It
Right.
really does. I wish we'd added one more on that when we was talking about developers and stuff. You know, people that live around this know what I'm fixing to say. We've had 2 developments going in our neighborhood, and we had red clay and sand all over our patio, our driveways, our streets, everywhere. And I know there's another development, I was talking to people who live there, that has the same problem. Why can't we change something like that to have a wash, where they have to wash the trucks off or clean the streets? I know I've talked to Chris on this and our city manager, and he said there's not a rule to protect us right now. Is that right?
Yeah, this really wouldn't be the area of that, to do that in the easement section that we're amending here.
No, I understand, but whenever
You can direct us to move forward with that and bring it back at another meeting.
Okay.
That's no problem.
As something else, or like
Yeah, another amendment
Amendment.
considered in the future.
Let me don't lose track here. This is a public hearing. Does anybody in the public wish to speak on these items here, these changes? If not, I'll close the public hearing. Council, do you have any more questions, concerns on these things with Scott, Chris? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the said ordinance with the amendments changes.
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Corrigan.
Second.
And a second by Councilperson Reiner. Council, any more discussion on this? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. That is approved. Go to work, Chris. Our next item is consider approving a letter of eligibility requested of Oscar and Karen Delegado. Hope I pronounced that right. Scott, you want to give us a update on that one, please?
Absolutely. Mayor, Council, this is the second rotation of this particular structure. This is a letter of eligibility request under our historic neighborhood incentive zone. And what that program does is waive any city taxes on the property that's deemed as historic relevance. In the case of this particular property, it would not apply to the land, just the structure's value in and of itself. This went before the Historic Commission and the Planning and Zoning Commission. They unanimously recommended approval as presented. Just as kind of a sidebar comment, this is the first of the H&IZ program properties that is going through a second rotation. It's already had a 10-year H&IZ program issued to it previously, roughly 10 and a half years ago. We've never had one go through a second rotation. The H&IZ program passed by council then set up an annual cap of $10,000 per year. We're a little bit under that. With this particular offering, will be a little over $7,000 if this is added on. The structure's value of this would abate roughly $748 per year. The applicant knows that that money is to be channeled into the continual maintenance of this house. That's what the program's set up for. The previous owner did that, has done a job, well, just an admirable job of maintaining the structural integrity and the maintenance of this house, the presentation of the house along the streetscape. The ordinance in and of itself does not prohibit or restrict another rotation, so there's no allowance. It's just FYI, this is the first, and I'm sure we'll start to see these other rotations. Really, the only restrictive governing device we have in the adoption ordinance in and of itself is that $10,000 per year cap, and again, we're under that. So your Planning and Zoning Commission and Historic Commission recommended unanimously approval as presented by the applicant.
Scott, how are the owners made aware of this? Does the city send out a letter saying yours is expired, or how does that work?
Every once in a blue moon, and I know maybe this was like a couple of years ago, with some of the new historic members, we updated the historic members on the program, and the Historic Commission, they're good advocates for this particular program. The other thing that they had done was use some of their funds set aside that council grants them for a mail out, which we've done recently. That was about 2 years ago, and we placed that mail out in the water bill for those residents, or we just mailed it out to them. So we did the Historic Commission did commission an outreach for property owners, but that was a few years ago, and certainly that's something that we may need to look at again.
So because now that some of them's going to start reoccurring or
Correct.
coming back around, you might want some method to have a flag saying, "Hey, this one here is due," or whatever.
And it's not
the tax
just,
office doesn't do it. I mean, obviously.
correct. And it's not just maintaining the historic landmark. It allows for minor maintenance work, a certain percentage of tax abatement, as well as major structural work. That you get a certain different levels of tax abatement under this program. So we will
Look into that, huh?
Yeah, we will channel the council's discussion over back to the Historic Commission and see if they want to use some of their funds for some outreach.
Council, have any more questions, or Scott, on this item? This is not a public hearing. If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the letter of eligibility requested of Oscar and Karen Delegado.
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Allen
Second.
and a second by Councilman Corrigan. Council, any more discussion on this item? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. That is approved. Our next item is to consider adopting resolution number 1818, ordering a special election for the city of Granbury to be held on November 6, 2018, for the purpose of amending the city's home rule charter and authorizing a contract with the Hood County Election Administration to furnish election service equipment, personnel, early voting dates, and all other related matters. As you recall, this item was on one of our prior council meetings, and this was going to be under reconsideration. With the issues we had, I would entertain a motion to start this thing off to go ahead and suspend the charter on this particular item for tonight, so that hopefully we can come up with a a resolution tonight?
So moved.
The rules, okay, I'm sorry, the rules and procedures.
So moved.
So we have a motion by Councilman Couch
Second.
and a second by Councilman Allen. Council, any more discussion on that motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. That is approved. So at this time, we'll move into the item itself, is the reconsideration of of this resolution. As you noted, we discussed.
Mayor, may I interrupt for a second? Did you set a date when we're gonna have that?
What's that?
You, on the, charter, you said, extend it?
No, to suspend the rules.
No, we're suspending the rules
Oh, okay.
so that we can, so if we don't get it the first time and we don't get it the second time, hopefully we can get it the third.
There you go.
We can
Okay,
get
I
something
thought that's
right.
what it was. I thought, well, could have a date for that. No, thank you.
Okay,
You're just looking for a date.
Sorry to interrupt.
we'll get you a date.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Mayor.
So with that said, council, we've got a reconsideration on this matter. Most of the proposed propositions we're probably okay with, but we have a couple of them that we're still discussing, and that being the options for the council to have an additional member, have the mayor vote or the mayor not vote, or option 3, which would be the mayor does not vote and define a majority of vote 3 to 5. So I'm going to,
Charlie's here.
yeah, and Charlie is here, right? I've seen him walk in. There he is. All right. Charlie, stand by. So the reconsideration, I'm going to go ahead and call upon Councilman Couch.
No, he didn't make that motion. The prevailing side made the motion. That would be Trish.
Okay, all right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So I'm going to call upon Councilperson Reiner.
Mr. Mayor, I think that we have probably discussed this ad nauseum, and I think that, in my opinion, we should move to vote for the charter as it stands with the option that the Charter Review Commission suggested, which was option 1.
Option 1. Are you stating that in the form of a motion?
Yes, sir.
So I have a motion to go ahead with option 1, as the Charter Review had recommended. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second by Councilman Corrigan. Council, any more discussion on this item? Okay, no more discussion. Councilman Corrigan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Allen, how do you vote?
Nay.
Councilman Couch, how do you vote?
Nay.
Councilperson Reiner, how do you vote?
Aye.
So we have a tie there, which in that case, the mayor has a vote, and I have reviewed it myself, and I vote aye. So that brings it to a 3-2 vote.
You're voting?
I'm voting. I voted. I break the tie. But, so that's a 3-2 vote. So that will go on the ballot as the proposition for that particular one. Now, at this time,
She made a motion to accept all of them, Mayor.
I know, that's what I'm saying. So she made the motion to accept all of those, so there will be no need to go through them individually.
No, she voted to approve the whole bill.
You can take them all together, or?
Well, we did that at one of the meetings, but we have reconsidered the whole package. So her motion was to accept the charter as written with option 5 or option 1 on that one, and that's what we approved. So I don't see a need to go through each one of them individually. So with that said, that is approved.
Well, I certainly understand why Mr. Mobley's not here tonight.
So her motion
Need two
was
votes.
to accept option 1, that was voted on and accepted. Now we need to pass the entire resolution.
Well, I thought she included that in there.
Does that need to be done?
We can do that, okay. If that, I've been coached by the attorney here that we need to go ahead and make a motion to accept to adopt the resolution number 1818, ordering the special election. So I need a motion on that one.
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Corrigan
Second.
and a second by Councilperson Reiner. Again. Any more discussion on the adoption of the resolution number 1818?
Mayor, clarify the motion, please.
The motion is for all the existing, which is in your packet, all the other propositions that fall, consider adopting that 1818, ordering the special election for the city of Granbury to be held on November 6, 2018, for the purpose of amending the city home rule charter and authorizing the contract with the Hood County Election Administration, furnishing that election service, equipment, personnel. So it's basically putting that on the ballot for those propositions that we have been discussing.
I have a
Is
question.
that clear?
I have a question, Mayor.
Councilman Allen?
I know there was two discussions I remember about it. One of them was taking Carla and putting her under Chris,
That one was taken off.
and then how about you signing all the documents and
That was left on there, I believe, yeah.
Okay. I think we should take that off and put that back with just Chris. The rest of them I agree
No,
with.
y'all have already removed that.
We removed the
It's not in what's presented tonight.
Right.
Anywhere. It's not there anywhere.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
City Manager.
So we had three options, just so everybody knows, in the packet
That weren't cleared.
that were three different options. Two of them had 20 propositions. One of them had 18. They chose the one with 20 propositions that included provisions to allow the mayor to vote with the existing number of elected officials up here. So that's kind of where we're at.
That's where the motion, to answer your question, Councilman Couch, that's where the motion is.
Okay, well, I want to make a few comments, given.
Ed, we're still in the comment
Okay.
portion of this.
I want to be on the record as stating that we've set up future councils for ties. We've never had that situation. I think it's sad that Mr. Mobley's not here.
Amen.
In order to have what happened. I think it's dirty. And that's not the democratic process.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilperson Reiner.
I would like to bring up what Bruce Wadley brought up regarding the tie issue. And we actually have other committees that have 6 voting members, and it doesn't seem to be an issue with the other committees. And it's not a tie, it's just the fact that that motion will die. So this isn't a sporting event, this is a different situation. And that's, I think, the recommendation, and don't forget, we're just asking to put this on the ballot.
These are
So that
propositions.
the voters can vote.
Right.
We're not making this decision, we're allowing the people that elected us to make this decision. It's
I
not
know,
us.
And I would tell you.
I'm totally in favor of that,
What?
but we have a responsibility to put something on the ballot that works.
Right.
And, having an even numbered council, I've done a lot of research, and they do not exist. They do not exist.
There's a lot of them do.
Every community around here is odd numbered for a reason, and that's to avoid ties. And yeah, you can say it's a no vote, but the people that vote in favor of something will disagree with that assessment. Because I was proposing that we add a seat and let the mayor vote so that this would be prevented, but we got tricked tonight. We got tricked.
Well, I've been here for 8 years, and I've never seen a tie yet, on voting. So I agree with Councilman Couch, it's not fair to our public, our taxpayers, that all of a sudden somebody don't show up. That's a sad day in Granbury, folks. And I don't blame the mayor.
Councilman Allen, let's don't.
I would have voted the same way he did if I was sitting in the mayor's seat, probably. So I'm not blaming you, Mayor, for
Okay.
that. You voted the way your conscience told you.
Mr. Mayor.
And to sum it up, Council, and Councilperson Reiner, and I think the whole council knows that these are merely propositions that are going to go on the ballot. And I will tell you that the commission, I've talked to them several times, one of the challenges that they were faced with what if, and Charlie's out here, what if these propositions are put out to the public to vote on, and they vote on half of them and half of them don't go. So they have to make sure that all these things come together, because some of these propositions, not just the one we're talking about right now, but a lot of these propositions tie into each other. So they had to do a lot of work to make sure that if one passed and the other one didn't, how does it affect it? And there's some that it still affects. So now we have to make sure that the community understands these propositions and what they do, because if none of them passed at all, and forbid that ever happen, but if they don't pass at all, we are back to a charter that is broken. And we've had many people say that, and we've had many attorneys say that. So that's still an option out there. If the citizens look at this and they don't pass any of them, then we're right back to a charter. We're working under a charter that we've been working on before. If they pass all of them but 4 or 5, and those have an impact on other ones, then there's an issue there. But the charter looked at that and made sure that they had some wording in there that would protect those.
I think they
So
did
hopefully that's what will happen.
I think they did a good job.
They did a great job.
What if Hood County News don't support certain people?
Okay, Mr. Allen,
What else?
I just have one question for Charlie.
we have the motion and the second, and you got a question for Charlie. Charlie?
Oh, I understand.
Charlie, how many cities are you aware of where the mayor votes and it's even numbered?
None.
Okay, thank you.
Any more discussion, council?
Railroad.
Councilman Corrigan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Allen?
Aye.
Councilman Couch?
Aye.
Councilperson Reiner?
Can you please restate, Jeremy and I were having a conversation. Can you restate the
The motion was to, right here, it's on the deal, to consider the resolution 1818, putting these on the special election. So, yes and aye? Okay. So that is passed. Thank you, council. Our next item is to discuss the proposed fiscal year 2018-19 property ad valorem tax rate for the city of Granbury, and to vote to place that proposal to adopt the rate of .399385 on the agenda for the future city council meeting as an action item. And I'm going to call upon our city manager, Chris Kaufman. He's probably got some staff people to talk on this.
First off, we were able to review what we were planning on doing, and we're changing what's in your memo. We were going to have a special hearing, and by looking at the calendar and working through that today with the appraisal district, we don't have to call a special meeting on the August 28th. We will have a hearing on the tax rate on September 4th, and then vote on it on September 18th. I believe I'm going to have 2 council members absent at that meeting, and so it would be good to have that tax rate voted on by the entire council. So I have Ava here if she'd like to speak and tell us some more details on this taxation.
Thank you. Good evening, council, city manager, mayor, city attorney. I wanted to just quickly run through the staff report that I prepared on this agenda item. Our tax property values have been certified on July 23rd, and at that point, the chief appraiser have calculated the effective tax rate and the rollback tax rate for the city. As you know, the effective tax rate allows the city to raise the same amount of taxes as we did last year when applied to the same properties, and that rate is 39.3067 cents. But our budget has been prepared on the same tax rate that was adopted last year, and that tax rate is 39.9385 cents. The difference is just a little over a half a cent, which is 0.06 cents. And that difference will allow the city to raise $79,000 more in revenue than if we would adopt the effective tax rate. Because the tax rate that we are proposing to adopt is higher than the effective tax rate, it triggers requirement where we have to have 2 public hearings, as Chris stated. And we were able to review all the tax laws and local government codes to ensure that we are in line with our publications and hearings and requirements on notices. And that's the reason we're proposing to have that first public hearing on August 21st and the second one on September 4th with the adoption of the tax rate on September 18th. I also wanted to mention that the rollback tax rate, as you can see on your agenda item, is a little over 45 cents. So that does not trigger the tax rate that we are proposing to adopt will not trigger a rollback election, but it still requires 2 public hearings because it's higher than the effective tax rate. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Could you tell them what the rollback rate is?
Yes. The rollback tax rate is 45.4268 cents.
What?
45.4268. 42 cents.
Rollback, okay.
Rollback, yeah.
Okay.
That's the
I
highest.
was thinking the effective rate, okay.
No, that's the rollback tax rate is the highest
Right.
tax rate the city can adopt without voter
Right.
approval, yeah.
Okay.
Subject to voter approval. They got a petition right now.
So council, you got any questions for Abe or Chris on this item? So at this time, what we're going to do is we'll entertain a motion to place the proposed rate of .399385 on the agenda for the future meetings of that and for the public hearings. So we're voting on the to place the .399385 on the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Corrigan. Need a second.
Second.
Wow. I have a second by Councilman Couch. Council, any more discussion on that rate? Councilman Corrigan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Allen?
Nay.
Councilman Couch?
Aye.
Councilperson Reiner?
Aye.
That is approved.
And you might as well set those 2 dates as well.
Well, we don't need to set that with that. Do we set it in the next one?
No, we need to establish these dates
Okay.
by action for the posting of the newspaper articles.
So we'll entertain a motion to set the date for for August the 21st, 2018 at 6 p.m. and also September the 4th, 2018 at 6 p.m. here at City Hall at 116 West Bridge Street.
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Corrigan
Second.
and a second by Councilperson Reiner for those dates. Any more discussion on those dates? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Those dates are approved. The next item we will do is to set the date, time, and place for the public hearing to receive public input. That's what we just did. That's what I'm saying. That was the next item. But we just
We're supposed to
did
do
it.
one for the budget now.
Okay. So we're going to set the time and date, place for the public hearing to receive the public input on the proposed fiscal year 2018-19 annual budget. And Ava, you go ahead and speak on that, but I'm assuming that those dates are going to be the same dates.
Just one day.
Well, there's
One-
just
one
one
date,
date.
right, okay.
Yes, and we have to set it separate. So we have, the proposed budget have been submitted to the city secretary's office on July 31st, and it was also emailed out to you, and it's also available for our public to view on our website. That is a requirement that we have to meet per our charter. And at this point, the proposed book is for your review as well. At this point, all we have to do is set the date, time, and place for the public hearing that will allow us to review and adopt the budget. And that date is, we are proposing to be set on September 4th at 6 p.m. at City Hall.
So council, they've recommended a date of September the 4th, 2018, 6 p.m. here at City Hall with 116 West Bridge Street for the proposed fiscal year 2018-19 annual budget for the public hearing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So do I have that motion?
Can I ask the question, or?
Good. Yeah, go ahead.
Is that date the only date we can do it?
We could have a special meeting, but it has to occur before the 10th of September.
I'm gonna be gone the 4th.
And I am too.
You are too? So,
For real?
so why don't we,
Well, council, if we're not going to have a quorum, then we need to set another date.
yeah, let's set another date, because that doesn't work.
That is our regular meeting, so.
That's a regular council meeting, so that's going to happen anyway.
Yeah, but we can have this at a special meeting
For
for the budget.
what, well, I guess I could ask you, what is the earliest for a special, if you're going to have a special for this particular thing?
It can't, what is it, the
20th day.
28th of August?
Oh,
30 days.
I'm sorry.
30
Yes.
days from the day it was posted, and then the 31st day, we can have a meeting, which would be probably September 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. We have to do it before the 10th.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
I'll be
First
back
through
on
the
that
10th.
Monday. Will you be back, Mayor?
But Monday is too late.
No, I'm leaving on the 3rd. I'll be gone
When will you be back?
anytime after.
Or the 10th, that is Monday, yeah.
So we could do it on Monday. Will you be back on Monday?
So Chris,
we won't. We
just
don't
to
need
clarify,
Don't need
the budget can be adopted, it does not fall under the same requirement as a tax rate. It can be adopted before the 30 days after it was filed with the city secretary.
Because this is not for the 2 meeting.
Well, the
This is-
charter
it's-
says that it has to be on file for the public review for 30 days, and then a public hearing can be held. And it has to be adopted before the 20th day before the end of the
Yes.
fiscal year. So you got 10 days in September to choose from.
So we could do it on the 10th?
That's up to y'all.
But I mean, he's asking, is that falling, does it put him in the
Yes.
category?
I'll make a motion, we do it on the 10th of September at 6 o'clock.
So we have a motion by Councilman Allen to set the date and time to place the public hearing to receive the public input for the fiscal year 2018 annual budget for September the 10th at 6 o'clock here at City Hall, 116th West Bridge Street, Granbury, Texas. Do I have a second? So that fails for lack of,
I'm checking my calendar.
Everybody's checking the calendar.
we don't have to have a quorum up there if we don't.
Yeah, you do.
I mean,
You
have
gotta
to have-
vote
how
on
many-
it.
But how many do you have to have?
4. We need 4 people to take care of business.
Right.
We'll have it.
So you can still do that on the 4th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fine.
Okay,
I'm good either way.
I'm waiting on the second here. Do we have a second on that, on the 10th? So it failed for lack of a second. So council, we still need to set a date. Have we got a motion for the 4th? Entertain a motion for September the 4th, 2018, 6 p.m., City Hall, 116th West Bridge Street, Granbury, Texas.
Someone,
I have a motion by Councilman Corrigan. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Councilperson Reiner.
I have a,
Any more discussion?
yeah, so what, in the event that we are one more short, then what do we do?
You don't have a quorum.
Well, I realize that,
If
but
if you don't, then we could try to post another meeting, but
Yeah.
it takes 72 hours.
okay, so we still could theoretically come back and do it on the 10th. Okay.
No, you don't want to do it on the 10th.
Well, I didn't-
Second motion. Mayor, I got something to say.
Council, go ahead.
You know,
Councilman Allen.
our budget is one of the I think one of the most important things we do for our city. And we take off work, go to meetings, budget meetings. We spend a lot of time on it. We spend a lot of time reading it and studying it.
Mhm.
And I ask Chris a lot of questions about something I don't understand in there. And, we seen what happened tonight with one of us gone. It's going to be two of us gone on the 4th. And to me, to pass a budget for the city, you need to have your council here. I apologize. I mean, I planned this cruise about probably 5 or 6 months ago with a bunch of people. And it's a sad day in Granbury again, folks, but we're getting hammered. So y'all don't want to do it on the 10th. You think you got your quorum, your votes, good luck.
Councilman Allen, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I'm in the same category, but I've had this information for a year. I knew that the budget was going to be on the 4th. You knew it was going to be on the 4th before you made the arrangements, and I chose to do that. And I know what the budget entitles, and I know what, if any input that I want to give, I'll maybe feed it through another council person if that's the case or whatever. But I made the commitment that I would not be here for that.
You said it's been a year.
This has been posted, well,
We put it out
how long
in
ago,
February.
Ava?
Yeah, it was first this year.
So,
Sorry.
so we have a motion and a second. What are you sorry about?
I'm just sorry we can't get along.
Okay, well, we can get along. So we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Councilman Corrigan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Allen?
Nay.
Councilman Couch?
Nay.
Councilperson Reiner?
Aye.
Once again, we have a tie. And I'm going to vote aye for the 4th. So the meeting will be held on the 4th, September the 4th, 2018, City Hall, right here.
Is it, Mr. Mayor, is it too late to find another date besides Monday? That's, I think
Today's
it's
Monday. It's Tuesday.
I'm not,
That's a Tuesday.
Monday?
The 10th.
Oh, the
It's a
10th.
Monday. I'm not necessarily in favor.
Well, we've already
of it.
approved the 4th. I'm going to move on. So that brings us to our executive session. I'll now declare that the Granbury City Council is convened into open session. Councilperson, all members are present except for Councilman Tony Mobley. The City Council will now go into closed session pursuant to provision of Texas Government Code in accordance with authority contained in the following sections: 551-071, consultation with the attorney, and 551-072, deliberation regarding real property. What?
Before we go into executive session, I would like to make a motion to reconsider, bring this back and reconsider a date so that more of us can be here.
So we've got a motion to reconsider for the,
I have to post the notice. When's the deadline to post the notice for the public hearing?
For which one?
The budget.
The budget.
We have to have it 14 days before the hearing.
Has to be advertised 14 days before the hearing.
We can't do it on the 24th, the next meeting?
So the next meeting's the
Of August.
21st.
21st, we can't do it then.
she's going
No.
reconsideration has to go to the next council meeting.
No, because it can't be in the paper in time.
As long as she gets a
What
second.
day do you want, what day's good for you, Trey?
Oh, say-
I'll figure it out. I'm going to be gone.
Okay, we've got a motion. We got to get a second on this one first. We got a motion to reconsider. Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, man, I got a bunch of seconds.
Yeah.
So we have a second by Councilman Allen. Now let's have discussion on what the date.
We need to vote.
We need to vote, yeah, reconsider.
I'm gonna be gone.
Any discussion on the reconsideration?
I say.
No, just on the reconsider. We're voting on the reconsider.
Yeah.
Nope. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The reconsideration is approved. Now we go into the reconsideration.
So what date can you make it?
So now, council, we're into the reconsideration. And we're looking at calendars.
I'm gonna be gone the second through the,
No.
We'll take any one.
through the ninth.
When's the drop dead date?
You're
One
gonna be
more
gone
time.
when?
Second through the ninth of September. I'll be gone.
To the town.
What about the 22nd?
That's too late.
The 22nd of September is too late.
No,
I'm talking about the 22nd of this month.
Of August.
We gotta let the public review it, and we've gotta have 2 weeks' notice before the public hearing. So they review it for 30 days, and then we've gotta have within that 30 days, we've gotta post a notice that gives them, 2 weeks' notice when the public hearing is, and the vote on the budget.
So really, we
So Chris, give us the dates that are available. We need dates
So, yeah, what dates do we have
1
here?
through 10,
of September.
yes.
1 through 10 of September is what we have, council.
The only day I do is the tenth. That doesn't work for her.
And you're gone when?
I'm leaving on the first,
First is a Saturday.
first September. I'll be gone.
You're gonna be gone on the first.
I could do it Saturday, that Saturday morning. We're gonna go down Saturday, but I could do it Saturday morning if that'll work for everybody.
What day's that?
The first Saturday,
First, will that work for you?
Labor Day weekend.
That'd be a great weekend.
I can even be there for that one.
You can? First, it'll work for you.
If I'm in town, I don't know if I'll be here or not. I won't know until next week.
I'm sorry this is taking so long. I just wanna make sure we do this correctly.
Well, I agree, I'm waiting on a date.
I
I'm waiting
can
on
do
a
the first,
motion for a
or
date.
I actually can do the 10th. I will make that work.
The mayor said he could be here the first, which is great.
But I'm, if I'm not here, I'm
He'll be here.
Greg, can you do the 10th?
I can't do the 10th.
You can't do the 10th?
But I can't do the other one either. I'm not in the equation. I accept the fact I'm not.
I do the
I'll
tenth
make
or
it
the
work.
first.
First through the 10th.
Let's make it the 10th.
Fine, let's do it.
That work for
Motion.
you?
I'll make it work.
Okay.
I need a motion.
So moved.
We entertain a motion to set the date for September the 10th, 2018 at 6 p.m.
That'd be fine by me.
Second.
At 6 p.m. here at City Hall, 116 West Bridge Street. I have that motion by Councilperson Reiner.
Yes.
Can I make a comment? You already got a second.
I have a second by Councilman Allen. Go ahead, Chris, with a comment.
I would just like to state that if you don't adopt the budget at that meeting, you take no action on that budget at the meeting, it will be approved the next morning.
Right.
Okay?
Wait,
The old
explain that, Chris.
The statute, the charter says that if you don't take action on the budget 20 days prior, before the 20 day prior to the end of the year, it stands approved with a unanimous vote. So you're drawing it out to the very last second to approve something, and I just want you to know I'm concerned about that.
And we should be.
Okay. That's what the charter says, is if the council fails to take action,
We could have done
Basically-
this, we could have done this 30 days ago, couldn't we?
no.
No, we could have
No,
posted
yeah.
it.
Well,
Couldn't we?
we're here now,
No.
so we need to figure out how to move forward.
We gotta have the meeting, but we can I'm just letting you know, that is the drop dead date, and you need to approve the budget or take no action by the end of that meeting, and the budget will be approved.
Or you can take no action if it's approved.
Yeah,
But it's
I'll worry
approved,
about it.
it's approved as.
well,
last-
because the charter says you're supposed to have a public hearing to let these people speak about it.
They'll be here.
And if y'all wanna change it at that meeting based on that comment, we can do that. Hopefully, I've got the budget the way y'all wanted it before we
I'm
posted
good
it.
with your budget.
I just wanted to make y'all aware, that's the drop dead date. Makes me very nervous, so we're good,
Makes
but
me nervous.
if y'all show up and we can have the public hearing, we've met the requirements, whether you vote on it or not.
Well, given what happened tonight, I mean, who knows? Maybe
Yes,
this will be,
exactly.
maybe this will be a new
Exactly.
technique.
So we have a motion and a second for the 10th of September at 6 o'clock. Any more discussion? Councilman Corrigan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Allen?
Aye.
Councilman Couch?
Aye.
Councilperson Reiner?
Aye.
So that date is set for September the 10th, 2018, 6 p.m., City Hall, 116th West Bridge Street, Granbury, Texas.
Bingo.
Bingo, good luck. So we'll now go back into executive session with the said terms and minus Councilperson Mobley. Council is reconvened into open session. There was no action taken in the executive session. Council, are there any more discussion? If no further discussion, the council meeting is adjourned.